If you could swim 50 miles south of Lima, Peru, and look down through the water, you would see something that should not be there. Inca walls sitting on the ocean floor, not scattered rubble washed out from shore. Structured walls, arranged with clear purpose, resting beneath the waves. Beside them, ancient ship tracks are cut into the seafloor, and navigational objects lie where someone left them, possibly centuries ago. This is not a shipwreck site where a single vessel went down. This is a landscape that people built, used, and then the sea took it from them. When most of us think about ancient civilizations on Peru's coast, we picture temples climbing hillsides. We picture terraces and plazas baked dry under a relentless sun. We picture the land above the tide line. We do not picture ceremonies happening below the waterline or navigational markers placed deliberately on the seafloor. So the question becomes, have archaeologists been looking at only half of these cultures all along? The site is called El Huarco. It sits on Peru's central coast, and before January 2026, researchers knew it primarily as a land-based archaeological complex. Then teams working offshore discovered the submerged remains. According to initial reports published in January, the underwater structures include Inca-era walls, what appear to be ancient ship tracks marking repeated passage, and navigational objects resting on the seafloor. You might wonder what happens next with a find like this. Peru's Ministry of Culture responded by moving to protect the marine area as national heritage. This discovery did not happen in a vacuum. Peru's coastal cultures were remarkably sophisticated long before the Inca expanded along this shoreline. The Carol civilization built urban centers nearly 5,000 years ago, complete with monumental architecture and circular plazas. Recent ancient DNA evidence shows people migrating over 400 miles along the coast, maintaining distinct identities across generations rather than blending into one group. These were not simple fishing villages scattered on beaches. If you have heard only the basics about South American history, you might be surprised. They were complex, organized societies with trade networks, ceremonial architecture, and deep regional ties that stretched for hundreds of miles. What makes El Huarco distinct is the language researchers chose when describing it. They did not call it a submerged building or a flooded port. They described it as evidence of a complex ritual landscape. That phrasing is deliberate and important. It suggests the underwater space held ceremonial significance, not just practical or economic value. The sea itself was not simply a barrier or a source of fish. It was part of the sacred geography. For generations, archaeologists have assumed that coastal ritual life stopped at the shoreline. El Huarco suggests it kept going right into the water. How did it end up beneath the waves? That is the part the initial reports do not clearly explain. Peru sits on a seismically active coast where land can drop suddenly during major earthquakes. But global sea levels have also shifted over the centuries, sometimes gradually, sometimes in sudden pulses driven by climate change. You have to consider both possibilities. Either El Huarco was built close to sea level and slowly drowned over generations, or a single seismic event pushed it below the waves in an afternoon. We do not yet know which. That uncertainty is itself a meaningful part of the story. What we do know is that Peru's government responded with notable speed. Within days of the public announcement in January, the Ministry of Culture began the process of protecting the marine area as national heritage. That decision matters because underwater archaeology faces threats that land sites simply do not. Ocean currents reduce visibility and disturb sediments. Salt water corrodes stone and metal over time. Dredging and development pose constant risks. Legal protection is an essential first step, but actual preservation underwater is far more difficult and expensive than preservation on land, and Peru is setting a precedent for how to handle these cases. And this is where El Huarco stops being only an archaeological story and becomes something more immediate. The same forces that submerged these Inca-era walls are the forces reshaping coastlines around the world right now. Miami, Jakarta, Venice. Modern cities built on coastlines, watching the water rise inch by inch, year by year. El Huarco is not just a window into the ancient past. It is a record of what happens when a civilization builds near the sea, and the sea eventually comes for it. The only difference is timing. The people of El Huarco likely did not see it coming. We do, and that changes everything.